right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, baseball community. Welcome, youth baseball community. Welcome to this week's get-together, coming out every Tuesday with a new episode with the goal of going from new coaches to good coaches and from good coaches to great coaches as efficiently as possible. And we're using sports as an enjoyable training ground for life. It seems there's a strong correlation with the adults that I come across, work with, interact with. Seems like there's a strong correlation with those that played a decent amount of team sports when they were younger and their ability to work with others successfully, take feedback, appreciate the importance of delayed gratification, willingness to work hard. Seems like there's a pretty strong correlation with that. And sports and baseball, in this case, more than ever, should be viewed as a place where we can have fun, a game that our kids can have fun with while learning crucial skills for life. The skills they need to have a successful life disguised as a fun game. Speaking of fun, watching the World Series has been fun, and I can't say the same for Aaron Judge. We'll talk about Judge in a second here and what we can learn from his struggles as of the recording of this. This episode is being recorded on Monday, just before Game 3 of the World Series. So by the time you listen to this, there may have been a couple more games played. So talk about that and a couple other things to watch and look for that we can learn from that are going on in the World Series. I have two great coaching quotes to share that can help guide us to being better coaches, to help mold and shape, fine-tune our paradigm so we can keep our eye on the prize. And we'll discuss exactly what helicopter coaching is and how I see helicopter coaching within the baseball community, the youth sports community, but also the overcorrection the other way, which we could say is very passive coaching, inattentive coaching. And we'll dive into this. Of course, we've touched on some of this before, but we're going to dive in so we can avoid the mistakes of being extreme on either side. All right, now let's dive into this World Series and what we can learn from it. Aaron Judge, of course, is struggling. Doesn't look like the same hitter that we saw all season. And there's a lesson to be learned. Our players, our kids, will go on the slumps. They'll struggle from time to time. It's inevitable. And I think it's a good example, while not great for the Yankees and Aaron Judge, it's a great example to share with our players, our kids, of the best in the world, the greatest hitters on the entire planet, struggle. And in his case, struggle a good amount here in the postseason. In terms of run production, he's the best hitter in the world. In terms of producing runs as a hitter, he produces for his team more runs, which is the goal of the game of baseball in terms of, winning and losing. It's run production, not who has the most hits, not who steals the most bases or who puts down the most bunts. It's who scores the most runs. And he's been as good at that as anybody. He just finished one of the best seasons ever in terms of producing runs for his team, substantially better than the next player, I think, was Shohei Ohtani. It wasn't even a close second. He was so far ahead of them. It was him and then everybody else. But right now, Aaron Judge, this postseason, through Game 2 of the World Series, he couldn't hit water if he fell out of the boat in the middle of Lake Michigan. He is struggling. Now, when our hitters start to struggle, and they will, at least from time to time, say, hey, we're the best hitters in the world. Have them name some. They'll probably say Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge, and then just lay out his stats. He's batting like $140, 6 hits, and 7 walks in 40 plate appearances and 19 strikeouts. So he has 19 strikeouts and 13 walks and hits combined. That's really bad. Now, that's bad for any hitter, but that is really bad for Aaron Judge. So you can say, hey, who's the best hitter? And his batting average, and I'm not a huge fan of batting average, as you all know, but kids can relate to this number. Maybe 10 years from now, all the kids and players will have enough context to be able to throw out things like, weighted runs created plus, et cetera, or even OPS. In 15 postseason series, he's batting 199 with 3 times as many strikeouts as walks and more strikeouts than walks and hits. And we're talking 250 plate appearances in the postseason. 250, a large sample size. So this is an example we could share with our players of a player who had the best hitting season that is going through a 11-game stretch, 11 games, and really struggling. So they're not alone. Even the greatest players have their struggles. So it's not something new to our players, our kid, when they're struggling. Now, as coaches, sometimes our most talented big game hitters are not necessarily our most talented hitters. And the same can be said for pitching. Sometimes our most talented pitchers are not our best big game pitchers. Sometimes our good regular season pitchers aren't our best big game or playoff pitchers. Now, often they are, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes that's just wear and tear. Sometimes that can be coincidence, could be a bad matchup with the other team. But sometimes the pressure of big games can and will affect players differently. So as a coach, it's important when we're making pitching decisions, and this isn't so much for the 9-year-old or 10-year-old level, but definitely the junior high level, definitely above that, we should keep an eye out for players that are thriving in those big game environments, those playoff environments. For example, the Dodgers' Tommy Edman. Guy batted .237 during the regular season. His OPS was .711. In the postseason, he's 18 for 53. He's batting close to 400. His OPS is around 1,000, substantially higher. Tommy Edman, regular season stats, nowhere close to Aaron Judge's. Postseason stats, way better than Aaron Judge's. I think the Dodgers have done a good job of seeing that and moving Tommy Edman up in their lineup. In fact, the Dodgers put Tommy Edman as the cleanup hitter this postseason. He had never been a cleanup hitter, from what I understand, and their lineup is loaded. The Dodgers, of course, have a loaded lineup, and Tommy Edman was moved to the cleanup spot. He tied a franchise record for RBIs in a postseason. He was named the NLCS MVP, and he's 5'10", so he's probably 5'9 and a half. Some of you coaches have 12-year-olds that are taller than Tommy Edman, and here he is batting cleanup for one of the best, if not the deepest lineup in the entire league, and he's a guy that didn't have great regular season stats. Do you have any Tommy Edman players on your team that step up? Maybe play a little bit bigger in the postseason, in the playoffs. Maybe they need to move up in the lineup. Sometimes our most talented hitters are not our best big game hitters, and sometimes our most talented pitchers are not our best big game pitchers. Jack Flaherty, he's not the most talented pitcher on the Dodgers staff, but he's been pitching really well this season and had a great Game 1 start in the World Series. So it's more of a psychological assessment than a physiological assessment. Something to keep an eye on as a coach. All right, so that's my update on the World Series. Next week, I'll have my final thoughts on the World Series because by next week, it'll be all wrapped up. But it's current, it's on TV, many of us are watching it, and so I like to tie it into how we can learn from it as youth coaches. Of course, there are some big differences between that level and our level, but there are a ton of similarities too, just a matter of connecting those dots, and that's what I try to do right there. Now I have 2 coaching quotes to share with you, and these are to help fine-tune our mindset as a coach. I think quotes are great to help fine-tune and improve our mindset, to help improve the mindset that we have. And this can go for anything in life, right? But in this case, with regard to coaching, this one is from Dennis Bergkamp. Says he's a widely regarded footballer, one of the greatest forwards in football history. Of course, they're talking about soccer as we know it in the United States. And this is what the soccer player, Dennis Bergkamp, said. He was a soccer player, but he went into coaching. And as a coach, he said this, quote, "Sometimes it's better to let them, the players, make a mistake than to step in and show them what to do," end quote. This is beneficial in a lot of ways. When we let players, we give them the freedom to make the mistakes rather than constantly, preemptively trying to tell them what to do and what to avoid. When it comes to safety, that of course is different. We want to proactively and firmly and boldly tell players what not to do when it comes to safety risks, especially with a baseball bat or errant throws that can do some real damage. But when it comes to fielding a ground ball, let's not go through every mistake that they might make before they even take a ground ball. Let's not forget the greatest teacher is the game itself, not coaches. Of course, we want to help, we want to support, we want to give tips, suggestions, but it's a combination of using the game to teach and us as coaches teaching. So the quote I thought was really good. Sometimes it's just better to let them make the mistake than to step in and show them what to do. And I think it's good to let them make the mistake a few times before feeling the need to hop in there and coach them up. At a minimum, this just lets the player players play a little more freely. They don't feel that coach breathing down their neck. They're going to play freer and looser with a longer leash. The next quote, this is from the late, great Pat Summitt. I grew up watching Pat Summitt coach University of Tennessee. Basketball had tons of success. And here's the quote from Coach Summitt. The willingness to experiment with change may be the most essential ingredient to success at anything. End quote. The willingness to experiment with change may be the most essential ingredient to success at anything. I like the wording there. Willingness to experiment with change. It's not the willingness to force change, to go head first into change, but to experiment with change, to try different things. And so when you come to this podcast, you're almost assuredly hearing different things, newer things, different take on things. And I believe what we've talked about here for almost 5 years now will lead you coaches to being great coaches, to a lot of success in all the different areas of coaching. But I'll tell you what, all the emails that I get from listeners, you coaches that have had the most success with what we talk about on this podcast and what's over at the website 8020baseball.com are those coaches that are open-minded. I can tell the open-mindedness is greater. The willingness to use what we've talked about here and really put it into action and give it a good trial experiment are those coaches that have had the most success and improvement. It seems like those coaches have the most improvement or the greatest improvements or the largest improvements as a coach with their teams and their players. So it's always good to have some quotes to help align us, to keep us directed down the path of great coaching. Now, let's discuss coaching neglect. We've probably all heard about parental neglect or neglectful parents. I would say the bigger problem in our society, and having been a teacher for 19 years, all different areas, different demographics, there's a lot of talk about helicopter parenting, but I would say parenting neglect from parents is a substantially more common and bigger problem. With that said, helicopter parenting, or I should say in this case, helicopter coaching, definitely has problems it will bring about. Helicopter coaching in youth baseballs, excessive involvement, micromanagement. Think of it as a micromanagement, not so much how close we are to our players physically, but it's the micromanagement, the constant managing, the control, kind of a control freak attitude. Now, many times it's well-intentioned. It just hinders young athletes' development. It does. It doesn't mean that we're hovering close by necessarily, although that is a characteristic, but it's not so much where we're located as coaches. When I take my daughter to the park, she wants to climb some trees. She may or may not be ready to climb that tree, but I'm not telling her not to climb the tree, and I'm actually not even giving her a lot of pointers on how to climb the tree, but I'm at the bottom of the tree in case she falls out, or in case there is a move that she may make that I see as very detrimental, very likely to lead to serious injury. But I'm not micromanaging that climbing of the tree. So helicopter coaching includes being excessively involved in every play or during the game, just all parts of the game, constant instruction, going into a lot of details with the instruction, making the decisions for the players, overreacting to the mistakes, or intervening in player conflicts. It is important that players learn to work through conflicts. They're going to learn to work through conflicts with teammates and other players and their friends. By working through them, we should give some guidance, but we shouldn't jump in and intervene when there's some disagreement. Write it out a little bit, especially that surface level, innocent bickering or conflict that come up with our players and kids. Let them learn from it, see what they do, and give them some suggestions. What are the couple things that they could do to help the majority of conflicts moving forward? What's the main tip? What's the one thing they could do that would help them in that situation? Don't overcoach it. Don't get crazy into the details because they're not going to have time when their emotions are through the roof to go through that bullet point list. So why do coaches fall into this trap of helicopter coaching? Well, typically it comes from a place of good intentions. Intentions are overvalued. Of course, that should be at the start of whatever we're going to do, the intention, but it should just be the start. Then actually doing things that help, doing things that yield positive, productive, healthy, quality results, that's the bigger part. Sure, the intentions need to be there at the start, but that's not the thing that gets you to the finish line. Good intentions with anything in life are the starting blocks, but you got to finish it. And good intentions are not going to get you down the backstretch. This goes with parenting, coaching, anything. I think it starts with the coach's desire to help. They want to help. Maybe they feel like that's their role. Their job is to get in there and help. Every time they make a mistake, every time a ground ball goes between our players' legs, every time they swing and miss, we are not required to coach that up. every time. It's not needed. It's not a necessity. The pressure to win, that can lead to helicopter coaching or overcoaching, and that's never a good place to be. That may blend with good intentions, but the goal of winning is a goal, but it's not the ultimate goal, and it should never be the priority. And maybe we're misunderstanding child development here. Maybe we as coaches don't fully realize that mistakes are a part of growth. They're vital for growth with our players and our kids. Now, what are some negative impacts of helicopter coaching? It stunts decision-making. Players don't learn to think and play independently. And here's another big one. It reduces the enjoyment. The game feels like work rather than play. They feel like they're getting strung along as puppets by their coach rather than playing free and easy, having autonomy. Think about the enjoyment we feel as adults when we have the freedom to do the project the way we feel like it should be done, or take on the task at work and get it done our way, rather than having every detail lined out by the boss, by somebody else, by the SOP, manual, HR. When we have that freedom, the creativity, that's a great feeling. That's freeing, and it really helps us flourish as adults. And the same thing goes for kids, which also in turn reduces anxiety. When we helicopter coach, our players, they play with fear, the fear of making mistakes, or at least a higher amount of fear, a higher level of fear. My freshman year of high school, I had a JV basketball coach who made you want to look over your shoulder every time we missed a shot, or every time we made a mistake, even if it was a tiny mistake. He made us want to look over our shoulder rather than playing free, figuring out our own mistake, getting back on defense, getting to the right spot on the court, and playing loose. Led to shots coming from tight muscles, passes with tight muscles, a little less free and easy on the defensive side. It wasn't good. We didn't do as well. And also helicopter coaching leads to burnout. Playing too much baseball leads to burnout. Kids not having success can lead to burnout, or at least kids quitting. But helicopter coaching can lead to burnout. That intensity can just diminish the interest in the sport, especially for those younger kids. Now, the high school level, college level for sure, pro ball, that's different, of course. Now, undercoaching or coaching neglect is the overcorrection. That's sitting over in the dugout during the warm-ups, during the throwing routine, not having a practice plan, a lack of structure, a lack of expectations, especially when it comes to hustle, safety. Also, there are valuable moments that instruction is needed. I would say most coaches, more often than not, the instruction is not needed, but definitely we will miss valuable instruction moments when we're over talking with other coaches in the dugout, or doing field prep while the kids are going through a drill or a warm-up or throwing routine. I think coaches that kind of neglect or show some neglect during practice send a message that this drill, or a big one is the throwing routine at the beginning of practice, that's not important. That's not a priority. They're not around. They're doing something else. It's not a priority to the coaches to be there and watch it. So it must not be a priority to the kids. And everybody at the youth baseball level, I know you've seen this. The warm-up is bad enough, but when it comes to the throwing routine, the throwing progression, the beginning of practice, before games, this is an area where coaches neglect is in a really bad place throughout the youth baseball community, and for that matter, throughout the baseball world. So when our kids get into the game and they're chucking baseballs all over the place, well, we sent a message that it wasn't a priority to us as coaches. We were off doing something else. We were off talking. We were off socializing while our kids were going through their throwing routine, throwing program, as some people call it, and chucking the ball all over and not working on things, talking, goofing around. So it's about finding the right balance. Establish clear expectations up front, set the parameters. We don't want it to be a free reign of a whole continent, but we don't want our players feeling like they're in these tight cages at the zoo. We want them feeling like they're at the wild animal park. They got room to roam. The fences are in the distance, but they are there. I think we should coach up the most valuable skills, the most important parts of the game first, and be very hesitant to coach up the little needle movers, especially at the lower level. If you're coaching pro ball or college ball, sure, that might be the difference between that kid getting drafted and whatnot. The details are important at those higher levels, the little details, that 5%, that extra 10%. But the first 80 or 90% comes from the 20 or 30% of things that are important, hence the 80-20 principle, the 80-20 rule. So let's make sure our default is to not give feedback. I'm not saying we shouldn't give feedback. It shouldn't just be our default. Every time we see an error, we correct it. Every time we see an error, we give feedback. Every time we see an error, we feel like we need to say something. There should be a checklist in our mind. 1, was that the first time they did that? If so, don't say anything, unless it's a serious safety issue. And I'm not talking about getting a bruise or a scrape or falling. I'm talking about like getting hit with a baseball, getting hit with a baseball bat, something that's actually a serious injury, not a bump or a bruise. Our kids probably need a few more of those, especially when they're out there playing sports. Next thing you could ask yourself, is this something that happens often? Is this mistake something that's going to come up a lot? Is this situation, this play going to happen often? Okay, what's the urgency to coach up that particular play, that skill, to correct that error? What's the urgency? Is this the right time? Does this kid respond well when I yell across the field the correction? Or are they a player that you got to come around the side or get them in a more low-key environment and be a little more low-key with your feedback? Okay, because not all players are like us. Maybe some of us are older coaches. We got chewed out a lot when we were players. Doesn't mean that's going to work with that kid, at least right now. You can work towards that, thickening the skin, but that's not something you can just bestow on a kid because that's how you are. Another thing is, ask yourself, is this a kid who's corrected himself in the past, made mistakes, looked for adjustments or not? So there's kind of a checklist we should go through as coaches before jumping in and correcting. So a balanced approach. You could even have a 3-second rule to allow time for processing, going through that checklist before feeling the need to force the instruction. So by having this balanced approach, we as youth coaches can enhance skill development, decision-making, a love for the game, while still preparing athletes for success by coaching them up at the right times. So it can be a win-win. It can be both sides of the equation. Now, proximity coaching, I think we should be close to the drill. I think we should be close to our team anytime they're doing something, but we shouldn't feel the need to talk every time we see a mistake, every time there's an error. Unless it's a serious safety concern, then immediately and boldly speak up. So hands-off coaching isn't good. Helicopter coaching isn't good. We want to be somewhere in the middle. That's the mindset when we roll out there, and it's the best of both worlds. It's a balanced approach. Hey, I love hearing from all of you, so send me your thoughts on this. Send me your questions on any of these topics that we discuss here, Coach Bo at 8020baseball.com. You can also get to me through the contact page at the website. And next week, we're going to talk about a specific strategy for youth sports, in our case, youth baseball, that will increase the success and confidence of our players and will make it more likely that our players stick with the game longer. The worst thing a coach can do is to force a kid out by something we could have done differently as a coach. We want our kids to keep coming back each season. That is the number one winning percentage. How many kids on the team want to come back next year? Now, there will be a level where that the game ends. We just don't want it to be at the 10-year-old level, the 9-year-old level, the 12-year-old level. We don't want it to be because it's something we did, something we could have avoided. So we'll talk about a specific strategy that will make it more likely that our players stick around and play the game longer. This is a league-wide approach, but it starts with coaches and parents speaking up. And we'll talk about that next week. And in 2 weeks, I have a tip for those baseball organizations that players try out and they bring players on. We'll talk a little bit about some trial periods to make sure that it's a good fit for the player, the family, and the coaches in the program. So I look forward to having you back next week on the 80/20 Baseball Podcast. Until then, let's take care of ourselves. Let's take care of our health so we can be there for our families, our close friends, our players and teams. And let's take this information out there and put it into play. Like a good 2-strike at bat with Tommy Edman, let's put it into play. Y'all take care. And until next week, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.